Well, welcome out there to the panel show. Always a pleasure to be here. Always a pleasure to have you out there listening. It's post-election. Yesterday was the big election in Fall River. Any surprises? Well, Cathy Ann Viveris did well. #1 on the city council. Did people expect her to get on the council? I think so. Did they expect her to be #1? Maybe not. But there she is, #1. And what does that mean for Cathy Ann? Well, it means that she has new life in her political career. And the 6th floor is getting closer and closer, if you know what I mean. They're only down there in that chamber, and 6 floors up is where the big seat is, and we think maybe we'll talk about it, but is she going to run again for the mayor's job? School committee, well, it panned out a little different than people thought, but we got most of the incumbents went back. Should they have all gone back? Probably not, but they did. And of course, the mayor's race, you can't say Joe Cavallo didn't do too well. I mean, he got almost half the number of votes the mayor got. So that's not bad. If you count the votes, Joe got 39 or so, the mayor got 8,200, 8,200. That's not bad for a first guy going out, first time in politics. Joe, you did well, and we want to see you again in the future. So, CJ, back, just as
I feel like I've never left.
lively as ever.
I feel like I've never left.
Bob, nice to see you. Where did you just come in from, Alaska?
Yeah, it's getting cold. I'm going to give a little hint to the audience. It's time to start dressing a little warmer.
Dan, how you doing?
How are you, Richard? Good to be back.
You did. You made a good show yesterday's run for school committee.
Yeah, well, the voters spoke, and we'll see what goes down over the next 2 years.
Your motto.
Your prediction was wrong.
I was wrong on one front, Mr. Ferry.
Your motto is held up for you. Don't raise a nickel and don't spend a nickel. Pretty close.
He did a great showing, though. He did, but
Yeah.
his prediction was slightly off.
Slightly off a little bit, but I had the.
What was your prediction?
My prediction was I was slightly surprised that I did not attain the 7th seat, but that was given to Laurie D'Souza, and we'll see what happens in the next 2 years.
7th seat, but that wanted to put you on the council, school committee.
No, but it would have put me just outside the money.
And if someone would have fell off the wagon?
That's correct.
Okay, now you get away for 2.
We'll see.
Never know.
Two-
Gabe Andre got on, right?
2 years down the road, we'll see what happens, Richard. That's a long ways off. We're just regrouping, and I'm looking to get back and do my usual analytical priorities without being a candidate for a short time.
Okay, good. Glad to hear you're going to be still around.
We're all
Positive.
back in the saddle again.
Yeah,
The
this
elections
is
are
like-
over.
This is like the election never happened. You guys are tuned. You're ready to go again. Whoa, you got the representatives race that.
Gubernatorial race is coming up, too.
So you know it never ends, right?
Oh, it never ends.
Well, this came in the paper just before the election, and I think this is
Oh, the
pretty
sterile
interesting.
news.
The headline is Council Candidate says CPA, that's the Community Preservation Act panel, lacks South End representation. Quite an astute observation by Cathy Ann Viveris, once again before the election took place, but she basically says Mayor Will Flanagan and the City Council, well, this is the report, recently named the 9 members of the newly formed Community Preservation Committee, but a candidate running for City Council is claiming taxation without representation. We've heard that before, because most of the members are residents, because none of the residents are of the South End. What do you think of that observation?
It's very interesting because Joe Cavallo, who was a mayoral candidate, said very clearly in a couple of his speeches that he would be the mayor of all the people. And he had made...
What does that mean?
Just that, a mayor of all the people.
What about the mayor we have now?
Well, we see it right here. The South End is not represented. I mean, even when Kevin Aguiar was the state representative, the South End was not represented.
He didn't represent the
No,
South
the
End.
people of the South End have always been overlooked. And when you look at what's happened with the school committee, and the school department, again, the middle school in the south end is closed. So there's no representation there.
And positively.
Well, yeah, well, you also got to realize, and Joe Cavallo mentioned it in one of the debates, not only is there not a South End resident on that board, there's not a South End resident that's been appointed by this mayor to any board.
Well, I think on a water board, you might have a South End, Maplewood area. South End?
Well,
Actually,
not
the only
quite.
South End resident that I could find that's still a South End resident was Alan Sylvia until he resigned.
And
Other than that,
of course, they've deflected that by saying that the park board and other boards voted and chose members, so that's why there's not a South End representative, but that's a bunch of bologna and Swiss cheese and mustard. The buck stops at the sixth floor with Will Flanagan, and he should have demanded that there be a South End representative on the Community Preservation Act Committee, which, by the way, I was proud to vote against that tax.
well, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, South End has the biggest population, and not having anyone on a community preservation board is kind of, is an oversight, or is it just something that the
And when you hear people say that, they say, "Oh no, you've got Pat Casey." Pat Casey comes from the South End.
Well,
So I'm like- and Pat Casey never says anything. She never says anything. I mean, and she never fights for anything. So really, how much work is she doing? Historically, she has not really done a lot of work for the
she
South
got
End.
reelected to the city council?
I
How do you-
understand
how
that,
do you
but
make-
again, she has not done a lot for the South End in the sense of fighting for representation for the South End, you know, making the voices of South End residents be heard on the sixth floor, and making sure committee members were put on from the South End.
The city council did make recommendations to the mayor for one of those appointments to the CPA board. Eric Pullman, that he stated at a neighborhood meeting that he did advocate for Pam Liberty Wabeau, president of the St. Anne's Neighborhood Association, and even she, who has a pretty good connection, in my opinion, to the Flanagan administration, even she was denied an appointment.
Well, I guess people would like to see, I would hope, but then again, it doesn't always happen, someone who knows something about buildings and preservation. Do you know if the makeup of the board has that type of representation, or are these people just plucked out of thin air because they made a donation?
well, I don't think they're plucked out of thin air, Richard. I think we do have two cities here. We have, we have a city of the campaign contributors, and we have the people who go to work, and as we can see that there's been talk about the mayor having a $500 a plate fundraiser.
$500 a plate.
$500 a plate.
Some people can't even afford a
Exactly.
$7 breakfast.
I mean, I haven't even seen gubernatorial candidates have fundraisers with that high a price tag, and that
Now,
fundraiser
who
was
in Fall
held.
River pays $500
Well, no
to
one,
have?
because that was held in Rhode Island, and there was not one Fall River resident, except for the mayor, at that function.
So outside influence into the mayor's office, CJ, is that who it
That's
is?
what it looks like. And,
Buy
you
your
know,
way, is that buy your way and pay to play?
That's what we have in Fall River. Just because the election's over doesn't mean we're gonna stop talking about it.
Oh, it's a major thing. I
it
think, I
is.
would think that a lot of people don't know of
And I mean, something.
$500 a plate. What do you get on a plate for $500?
Rubber chickens.
It may be a ticket to access, and that's the thing is, we have to
Stuck to
ask
the
the
bottom of the
question,
plate?
Is Fall River for sale? Because if we look at some of the things that have transpired, we look at some of the contracts given out at the infamous Matuk, we find that almost every contractor who gets any kind of work in this city, if you follow the money and go to the campaign contribution list, their name will appear.
Now, who got a contract? Can you let us know?
Well, I know for a fact that Ray Haig got a contract, and Ray Haig gave money, his daughter gave money, his wife gave money, and virtually, and the fact is Ray Haig has a city job, and I don't know how many other city plumbing contractors had an opportunity to bid on that. And, these things, even if they're not improper, give the
Yep.
illusion of impropriety.
Appearance, sure.
And we
So-
don't have a state ethics commission that oversees our city employees. It oversees a city electorate, our elected officials, but it doesn't oversee our city employees.
employees.
And maybe we need to have that happen. Maybe we need to have an ethics commission come forward.
Spotlight put on people
yeah,
who
and
work
put-
for the
right,
city
because-
and donate.
Not only that, but we also need to have a spotlight put on to our city employees.
Should it be illegal?
Okay?
Should there be a law that says that no one who works for a city can donate to the mayor when he's running for re-election?
That's one way of doing it, but then people say you're infringing on their freedom of speech and their rights. But there's nothing that says we can't say if you work for the city and you own a business, your business cannot get a city contract. That's one way of stopping
Undue
the
influence?
impropriety. Because, exactly, it's undue influence. So people like Bizco or Hague or anyone else in city departments cannot bid for a contract, like snow removal or plumbing or alarm controls or any of those things.
And frankly, I think that's the better way to go, because you really can't tell somebody what they can do with their private money.
Exactly.
I'd have a problem with that.
And they would filter it through another, the way to cure this, Richard, is really simple. And it's something that we haven't had for 4 years, or almost 4 years now, and that's transparency. We
Well,
don't have.
That's a word that's been kicked around. I mean, people
Everything
are getting
seems to
tired
be
of.
done behind.
What does that mean,
closed- Well,
transparency?
I think it would be pretty easy if.
It's a corrupted word, isn't
Yeah,
it?
well, if the Fall River of economic destruction, when it was actually trying to get Fall River people to work, if they put out a list of the people who were bidding for the work, and that list comprised of not only people who contributed, but everybody who did that type of work in Fall River, then we could say, okay, everybody's getting a fair opportunity. If when the city gives out snow plow contracts and any other kind of contract that's the city, if they listed the people who bid, listed the bids, and had transparency, it would be very simple, because if someone who gave to the mayor's campaign wasn't the low bidder, then now we've got an issue.
Yeah.
So the fact is that we need this transparency, but everything here seems to happen behind closed doors.
Now, there's one of the, matter of fact, it was Kathy Ambiveris again in an interview she took part in regards to whether the city needs a tourist director. And she said basically the city probably doesn't need a tourist director per se, but maybe a combination of a tourist director and an economic development director.
Don't we already have an economic development director?
Well,
We do.
you know,
Supposedly.
that's the point. Do we?
Yeah, well, that's the question.
I mean, there's a name of...
we're paying a man $150,000 a year to be the director or the vice president of the Fall River Office of Economic Development, and that's money we're flushing down the toilet.
Well, you know as well as I do that there's a suspicion that that's a little clique.
Oh, not only is it a little click, here's the funny thing about it. Here's the stuff that people don't talk about.
Beyond the suspicion.
But and this is beyond the suspicion. Kenny Fiola doesn't make his money off of that contract that he was able to immediately disclose. He makes his money off of the RDA properties.
Redevelopment Authority.
The Redevelopment Authority. So when they sell a property, he gets a cut of that. Remember, real estate, sale, commissions. You know this. He's a lawyer.
Well, I mean-
okay? He's getting a cut off of that. All of those transactions, he's getting a cut off of that.
I mean, you're saying something that...
He's acting as the agent. And we've looked into this.
Well, that would really be a real conflict of interest.
And that's
He's
where-
acting as
that's
a
where
real
this
estate
lies.
agent and getting a commission, then I would think that's...
Well, you remember, the Fall River Office of Economic Development is different from the RDA. They're separate entities.
Well, I understand what you're saying. However, his duty is first to,
But he has a duty in both.
well, it could be the conflict that...
But again, because they're a quasi-governmental agency, they're not subject. And the only way to do away with the RDA is for the sixth floor to abolish its funding.
They don't seem to be interested in doing that, do they, Dan?
The redevelopment authority, not.
To abolish funding?
I don't, if the city council were wise, they'd restructure the whole budget process. But You know, it's great that Kathy was elected, but before you have fundamental change on the council, you need 3 or 4 more votes to join her. You can have all the best ideas in the world. We've seen that with Kathy Viveris on the city council and others, and Joe Martins on the school committee. But unless you get 5 votes on the council and 4 votes on the school committee, you're virtually dead. So.
Yeah, you're standing there alone.
We're going to have, come January, they'll get sworn in, new city council. Bob, you think with people like Kathy Ann Viveris and a few others, there'll be a greater scrutiny when the budget time rolls around? You're going to demand,
Well, I
wanna see
would hope
things?
so. I believe Kathy Ann will bring a different perspective.
she's in the management field, et
Yeah,
cetera.
she has the management background. She's also been there before. She also understands the budget in some of these positions very well. And I think she's the type of person that will really ask the tough questions. And I think that it's going to be, it's going to maybe hopefully set a new tone for this council, because we really need to change the way we do business in this city. We really do.
And one of the things is, this council always has, and we look at it historically, and it's not just with this mayor, it's been with every administration. This council always divides itself 5-4. You look at the votes, it's always 5-4. And it's always in the mayor's favor in most cases. We've only had a couple of councils, I think, that have always been against the mayor.
Yeah, you've never had a faction of councilors that would say, look, this budget is out of line.
Right.
We're sending it back. We're gonna go to a 112. We need a zero-based budgeting. We've never had, although Councilor Maioza has called for an audit, he's never had, and Bob and I have been calling for audits for years, but there's never been 5 votes on a council to get a full comprehensive audit. And until there is, you won't see it.
Do you think because the city charter puts a lot of power into the mayor, it's easy for the mayor to compromise a number of city councilors? In other words, to keep a majority in his back pocket?
Go ahead.
Well, yeah, I think it is, but, I think that we have, there seems to be a uniqueness about Fall River government that I see. It's like government, it's like ostrich government. It's like we bury our head in the sand and we pretend things don't happen.
We come up once in a while for air and we say, what's...
we come up for air. It's like the fact about economic development. Nobody, it seems that anybody who comes up with an idea that goes away from what the 6th floor says, they say he's an obstructionist or she's an obstructionist.
Negative. Should be negative.
You're negative.
That's
You're
a
negative.
popular word.
Exactly. And the ironic part about it is apparently they've forgotten their history, that some of the most contentious debate that ever took place was at the Continental Congress when we created our nation. And some of those people that became American heroes were called traitors, and they wanted them hung. And the fact is that sometimes differing opinions can create something in the middle. It's called a synthesis of ideas. But if everybody marches in lockstep like we do in this city, it seems as though if you come up with a new idea, it's just like economic development. Let's face it. How can we develop an economy that basically the only thing we seem to be developing is how to bring people into our public housing? That's the only thing we're getting
That's
good
a
at.
big industry, isn't it?
Because as a matter of fact, CJ has a son-in-law who gets paid, what is it,
$15,000.
$15,000 to bring in people from Pittsburgh to our housing authority.
Wow.
$15,000 per unit.
Per unit.
Per unit. Out of the Pittsburgh Housing Authority. He has a United Van Lines. And they go to the housing authority, and when they, as a matter of fact, when
They
they were
bring them
building
from Pittsburgh to Fall River?
Fall River and New Bedford, and now that
We
the
don't
housing,
have anybody in Fall River.
and now that the housing units
Gotta
are
go
drying
to
up,
Pittsburgh. That's
Yeah.
like on the other side of the world
Yeah.
almost.
And now that the units are drying up in Fall River and New Bedford, they're looking a little further towards the western part of the state, and they're looking at Worcester and Springfield and those areas to dump them into those Lowell, the gateway cities again. And this is what happens.
But yet-
Gateway City. What is it? What is a gateway city? Gateway to
That's
what?
an old mill city that there's nothing to. It's
Well,
a gateway to
keep
poverty.
referring
Yeah.
to Fall River as a gateway city, but then you're going to ask the question, a gateway to where?
Gateway to poverty.
Yeah, it is
Is that an industry in Fall River?
Yes.
Poverty?
Yeah.
In other words,
Is it?
there are a lot of
About
nonprofits in Fall
75%
River.
of the city.
A lot of nonprofits.
That
and of
take up a
course,
lot of space, a lot of land, and they pay no taxes.
pay no taxes.
Well, as I said, we have two cities here. We have the city that the mayor stands up during a debate and says, we're moving forward, we're doing better, we're doing this. And yet on the same front page, you see the pastor of Santa Cristo Church saying, these are difficult times. A lot of my parishioners are out of work. Well, it seems as though the sixth floor and the city council refuses to acknowledge the fact that, the majority of people in the city are having a very difficult time dealing with this stuff because everybody seems to want to say, oh, we're doing better, we're doing great, and realistically, you're never going to cure them. Well, one of the first steps in a 12-step program is acknowledging that you have a problem.
Richard,
No.
the median income for a family of four is $36,000.
Now, it was mentioned by the mayor that unemployment went from 19% to 12%.
Yeah, because they knocked them off the rolls because they ran out of unemployment. I mean, we all know how that works. I mean, after, you run out of unemployment, you're removed. It's
And
those
that counts.
statistics. That's it.
Okay, we'll move along to the waterfront. If you travel there lately,
There is no waterfront. There is no waterfront right now.
I mean, you can't, what's going on down there is just purely amazing, and they've just begun. It's
The
very
roads have started to be
difficult.
closed.
Yeah,
They're all being redirected. As a matter of fact, I was coming off of one of the 79 spaghetti ramps onto 195 today, and they're finishing the ramp that comes down from the Chamber of Commerce onto
yeah.
195 off
Yeah.
of Pecasset Street.
yeah.
And they're finishing that because they're closing down all these ramps. And, I have to quote Rob Mellion, because I don't know where his head was when he said this, but he said, we're talking to AAA to tell them that the city's still open, that the waterfront is still open, that Battleship Cove is still open. How are you going to get there? People don't want to go through traffic. They'll say, the heck with this, I'm going to Newport.
Yeah, the patent.
But remember, the ferry's coming in 2014, and we're going to have to drive through this construction to get on the ferry. That ferry's going to die real fast.
Now, you got all that construction down there, so I guess the question is, what economic benefit does the Fall River directly derive from that construction work?
Well, the reality
If any.
The reality is that economic development, if there is any, which I doubt there will be any serious, because what are they going to go to? The Battleship? Historically, it hasn't been a great draw. So the reality is, it's not going to be ready until, they said, 2016. We're lucky if it's done by 2018. We all know how these projects go. And I think what that will do will make it easier for people to get from 195 to Newport in the summer.
They're going to go to the Broken Carousel, Battleship Cove, the Marine Museum. I mean,
But-
the reality is we don't need a tourism director because there's nothing here to see.
But the thing is that, in reality, when 79 does finally come down, okay, and all of that's open, that is going to open up the waterfront, the then waterfront, to the rest of the city. Now, getting the people to come down from the rest of the city to the waterfront is going to be the first thing. The second thing is that if you're looking at the property transactions currently, the whole Duval Street area is starting to be bought up. All those little pieces of land are starting to be bought up.
By who?
All along that area. Yeah, by who? By outside influences. We're not going to name names, but by
Well, you
outside
can
influences.
name a name.
And, the La Cosa Nostra has a lot to do with things. We'll leave it at that. And they're starting to buy up the property. And that will make for a good area to develop. Okay? And that
Strip
could
clubs,
help.
casinos, what are they
We
going to
don't
put
know
down
yet.
there?
We don't know what they're going to want to put
That's where the
there.
train station's going, too,
But here's the
if
thing.
it ever gets here, right?
If it ever gets there.
Well,
yeah.
No
wait a
funding?
second. Let's quote our governor. Okay, he said in the Boston Chamber of Commerce that South Coast Rail is a wonderful project, but it's never going to happen because we don't have the financing. He then comes down to Whites of Westport and he says, "I've created it so that the incoming governor can't back away from it. He's made it so that there's so much money invested into the project that backing away from it is just going to be such a loss."
Well,
that he has to look at just saying, I might as well just go in lock, stock, and barrel. But that's not going to happen.
Have you ever heard of the highway to nowhere? I mean, you can put a lot of dough into a project, and then all of a sudden,
It doesn't happen, and that's what's going to happen here. So, I love quoting Senator Theresa Murray, and, the biggest mistake she ever made was say this to me, but she said, "You will not see the South Coast Rail in your lifetime or in mine."
Now, some of the discussion in regards to the city council, I imagine the mayor, is that to get businesses into Fall River, if people are serious about getting businesses into Fall River, a couple of things need to happen. Number one, school system needs to be improved. And number
Dramatically.
two, the crime rate has to go down.
Dramatically.
Now, does this make sense? Dan, you ran for the city council, school committee?
Well, you know, the only way the school department changes is if people are willing to reprioritize the budget and how they spend money and from the top down. And, you know, I'm not very optimistic going forward, but we'll wait. Now, I'll stand to be proven wrong, but I doubt it.
Joe Cavallo posed a question to the mayor in a debate. Why has the city reduced the graduation average from 65 to 60?
That's the passing score at Durfee High School.
Yeah, well, he asked the mayor, why did that happen? Of course, that helps the graduation rate, but does it help in the long run the education of students?
I think the more important answer, excuse me, Danny, but I think the more important answer to that was what the mayor said. He says, I'm only one vote. I'm only one vote on the school committee. They have to decide what to do with it. No, Mr. Mayor, you're the leader. You're the one that has to lead the school committee. And you have chosen to lead the school committee into failure.
Now, could a student say, you know, Mom, I just graduated from high school, Durfee, and I feel I've been cheated a little. I know I got a 62 average, but
They've been cheated a lot, Richard.
Exactly.
The reality is that, you know, this city has so many problems. You talk about business relocating. This is where we get the ostrich government again. They stick their head in the sand, then they pull it out and say, we've got to attract businesses. How are we going to attract businesses? Joe Cavallo at the debate gave some very telling statistics. 70 to 80% of the children in our schools are on the lunch programs.
Yeah, that was
reduced
amazing.
or lunch. 70 to 80%. We're 44th in heroin addiction, and we're 48th in crime. And then we look at and this is one of my statistics that I brought to the council. The average income is $24,000. Where are you going to get people to buy your products if you're a business?
okay, gentlemen, we're down to the end of the program. Any predictions, Dan? The new government coming in January?
I think you could see Kathy Ann Viveras run for president. It'll be a battle between her and Wenda Pereira.
That'll be an interesting one. Bob?
Well, I just hope they change the way we do business.
Okay, CJ, anything?
I just see the same old happening, and I just see a few bumps with Kathy Ann being there. But I see that the school committee is going to fall in line with the mayor and whatever the mayor and Meg Mayo Brown wants, and our students are going to suffer for it.
Well, gentlemen, always a pleasure to have you on a program. Dan, good luck in the future with your political career. You're back in action, I know. Bob,
I never fell out of action, just did it in a little different way for a few months.
keep us informed of what's going on. And
Positive.
CJ, you got dig a little deeper. Come up.
We're always stirring up the ground. We like doing that.
You're going to be the official mudraker of Fall
Hey,
River.
if
Who was
somebody-
that newspaper man? Anderson? What was his first name?
No, not Anderson Cooper.
No, years ago, Anderson.
I don't know.
Yeah, he was a columnist, and he discovered, you know, he
Who
would
was
write-
it that did the Watergate thing?
Bernstein and
Yeah,
Woodward.
Woodward and Bernstein. There you go.
Okay, gentlemen, thank you. Thank you out there for listening to the program.
You can be
I hope you
Bernstein, I'll be
appreciated the panelists.
I got to be the Jew.
Let me know if you have any questions you want to ask. We'll always be happy to accommodate you. So, once again, thank you out there.